establish a discounting discipline early on, because the fastest way to destroy good pricing strategy is not to manage discounts. From tomorrow, when you're applying the new prices, you already have a new demand, a new volume, a new profit level without big investments, without time lags. This is why pricing is so strong, so quick and so powerful.
This is also why a lot of us have the passion for pricing, because of the great power that comes from it.
Because many companies do a big pricing initiative and then it gets full of dust. Nobody touches it again. Professional pricing is a capability and not a one-time exercise. Sometimes the most powerful pricing story is the simplest one. And not everybody needs a full deck. Only one slide can do it, especially if you're talking to C-levels. Treat pricing as a capability, not as a project, because someone should own it. Processes should exist. You should review pricing quarterly and not every 3 years.
Hello, Danilo. Welcome to the Price Talks. It's an honor of hosting you here.
The honor is on mine. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. For everybody that doesn't know you yet, well, I do have to say I don't think that there are many that haven't heard of you. But for the ones that haven't, you're a well-known author of many pricing books. And one that actually I'm currently reading is, for example, the 10 Rules of Highly Effective Pricing. You've also published the Pricing Model Revolution. But another thing, you've just published the Revenue Growth Management.
Exactly. So this here is the last baby, Revenue Growth Management. This is a book specifically for FMCG and retail companies.
So really glad to have you. And let's dive into the subject and the questions. My first question is, could you take everybody along the line of what's your area of expertise and how did you actually roll into pricing?
So my main job is to work as a management advisor and support companies on one hand to boost revenues, but on the other hand to increase profits. So how can we better monetize the value that we're giving to our clients? This is the key question that usually I look into my projects to support companies to increase profitability. I do this across industries and across geographies. And as many of us working in pricing, I didn't plan to work in pricing. I started my career as a generalist management consultant. So I was doing cost cutting, I was doing M&A, I was doing process optimization. And when I was doing cost cutting, I realized that it's not so much fun. You have to lay off people. People do not want to see you around. You have to discuss with unions. Waking up in the morning and going to the client was not a big fun. And then I had my first pricing project and everybody was welcoming me. We were boosting profitability. The people I worked with were promoted because they were adding so much profitability to their company. So it was much more fun. I call it the sunny side of consulting.
Yeah, I can fully understand. So it's lovely to hear that indeed. If we talk about profitability, people say a lot of time pricing is one of the strongest levers to work with, right? And why is pricing such a strong lever to work from compared to cost?
I mean, if you are wanting to boost profits, there are only 3 profit drivers because profit equals to price times volume minus cost. If you want to optimize cost, then you need to, for example, shift your production plants from Europe to Asia, where labor cost is lower. This takes ages, has a high cost, and is not ideal. If you want to boost volumes, if you are in a saturated market, then this means you're taking away some volumes from your competitors who will not stand still and see how you're taking away their clients. They will react and it will be a terrible war that is breaking out. However, on pricing, many companies are still doing pricing as they did in the past, without a systematic and innovative approach. Just think about the power and the speed of pricing by looking into a fuel station. They change the price at the cashier in the shop. Outside, the price is changed within a fraction of a second and demand changes. Or you can even avoid increasing or changing prices. You can just reduce discounts without touching the price list. And this will have also immediate effects. So from tomorrow, when you're applying the new prices, you already have a new demand, a new volume, a new profit level without big investments, without time lags. This is why pricing is so strong, so quick, and so powerful.
Yeah, okay, good. And I fully understand it. So I think it's good for everybody to understand that through pricing. And I think this is also why a lot of us have the passion for pricing because of the great power that comes from it. Well, let's start off with the first question. And in your long history, you have come across many organizations, you've worked together in multiple teams. But I think we all have that one moment in our career where you learn from it, right? What is the biggest mistake you have ever made in a pricing project in your career?
Well, when I started my very first pricing project, I once spent days and days crafting a beautiful layered value-based pricing narrative. It was full of segmentation logics, psychological pricing cues, and a storyline I was really generally proud of. It meant to be for sales reps trainings, so I went all in on clarity and persuasion. When I finally presented it, this was to the client's CFOs, he looked into the deck, nodded politely, and said, "This is great, but can you put it all just on one chart?" So it
Oh,
was a humbling reminder that sometimes the most powerful pricing story is the simplest one. And not everybody needs a full deck. Only one slide can do it, especially if you're talking to C-levels.
yep. Yeah, it's a beautiful lesson, right? That keep it simple. The
Exactly.
KISS principle is just a very, very powerful one. And if we take then this a level further, if you look at from a company perspective, what do you see the most common mistakes company make when they're trying to do the first steps, when they're trying to professionalize their pricing?
So the first would be to treat pricing as a one-time project, because many companies do a big pricing initiative and then it gets full of dust. Nobody touches it again. Professional pricing is a capability and not a one-time exercise. So this is something that really needs to be very clear. A second element is that many are starting with internal opinions instead of bringing the voice of the customer to the table. So this means they are anchoring prices on cost, on competitor pricing, on gut feeling, or on legacy price lists. And this is something that will then not help in understanding what willingness to pay is really all about.
I think willingness to pay is something that we see a lot of organizations struggling to really get from, right? So the larger enterprise organizations, they can afford doing all kinds of research, market research. But let's say you're a wholesaler, retailer, you do about 50 million. How would you, what would be small useful tools that they can use to understand the willingness to pay?
I was discussing this the other day with such a company who didn't want to invest millions and a lot of time in doing a lot of research. So we came up with an A/B testing. So you can take two channels that are similar, or to markets that are similar, or to clients that are similar, and then change the price and observe what the demand is. So you will get an impression about willingness to pay. You will be able to understand, can I even increase prices further? How will be the reaction to the market? So by observing different price behaviors in comparable markets or channels, you can then already get a feeling of what customer value is all about. Another thing that is an issue is that a lot of companies are under investing in data and tools. So they have a number of spreadsheets all over the company. They have outdated ERP price list. They're not using data. They have no willingness to pay research, not even this testing. So this is clearly a limitation that hinders then the increasement of the pricing maturity.
Where I see a lot of pricing specialists in managers struggling in is value-based selling, because we all want to do it. How to internally get that conversation flowing, and how then to translate that into a pricing strategy.
That we must make sure that when we are having pricing initiatives, sales is part of it to avoid the not invented here syndrome. So when we are introducing a new way to price, we always have some sales representatives being part of it so that we have their views, their expertise, their support. And they are then the champions that will be the first ones to live and act upon the new pricing approach, so that the other sales reps will also follow them. So making sure that they are part of the solution is the best thing.
Yeah. So would you say start with the champions in sales that really can bring across, and then everybody in sales will see that they are outperforming,
Exactly.
right? And they will start following them.
One other topic which was related to what we discussed is to forget to test before launching. You don't want to boil the ocean. So skipping pricing experiments, ignoring core tests, never doing A/B testing, fearing customer pushback is something that is an issue. And professional pricing requires evidence, not courage alone.
Can you help our listeners in a step-by-step approach on how do you get then that evidence base, right? How in your experience, how are the internal lines? How should you get from that pricing initiative, from that first initiative, how should you get the backup from the executive suite in order to be able to roll it out more complete?
Let me then tell you a recent client case I had on this regard. It was a company owned by a PE investor. The PE investor wanted to push a price increase, and when I met then the management of the company, as well as the sales rep, they said, "Oh no, we were not having price increases for the last 5 years. If we increase prices, we will lose our customers." So what did
Wow.
we do? Well, we segmented the customer base. We identified the ways to increase prices, but we didn't roll it out immediately to everyone. We started testing. This means we started with the smallest and less critical clients and did also some trainings of the sales reps. And when we saw that we were able to increase prices without significant pushbacks, with a clear success rate, then suddenly everybody said, "Oh, I want to be part of this great initiative." And then we approached the medium-sized customers and at the end the large customers, and we were able to increase prices significantly because we had people on board, we tested it, we learned from the initial less critical price increases and how customers reacted. And this was the key to success. Another point is then not to set an ongoing pricing governance with clear rules, because otherwise you get uncontrolled discounting. You have channel exceptions, you have erosion of price lists. So governance is sometimes maybe a bit boring, but it's essentially to build a foundation and set the rules of the game to manage pricing.
With regards to governance, I always hear the biggest erosion of margin is the discount structure that goes unchecked, or the rebates that are not aligned with the strategic goals. If you say, okay, we need to start building in a governance structure, where would you start with?
Well, I would look into the different type of companies that we are looking at, because different companies might need a different type of governance. For example, if we are speaking about a company that has quite an international product, a strong brand, then probably rather than putting pricing into sales, you would put it as a separate function to make sure that sales has clear sales targets and pricing is understanding how to best price it, so there are no conflicts of interest. I had a case where pricing was sitting in sales. Sales had very strong volume incentives, so they were able to reduce prices to increase discounts to meet their volumes, but then profitability was very low. So you have to understand how the company is best working to make sure that at the end also the margin is there, the margin that you are looking for.
Yeah, and I think you're touching upon a great point, because the eternal debate: where should pricing be seated? Right? Should it be under finance, marketing, sales? Should it be a standalone? What do you think in your optimal situation?
Yeah, so the answer is it depends. It depends on the type of industry you're in. To give you an example, if your business is super local, if it's driven by big B2B projects, maybe having it in sales could be a good solution, because then you are crafting it based on the project request that you're getting. So it's really bespoke for single large projects that you are pricing. However,
Mhm.
if you have a product, an FMCG product, for example, an iPhone that you're pricing across Europe and different markets, then you want to centralize it. It should be sitting in marketing and not sales. Or if you are an airline, then you would establish a separate function called yield management that balances on one hand available seats and capacities, and on the other hand the forecast in terms of demand and pricing. So really, based on the industry you're in, there could be different ways of treating this.
And I do think for everybody that is struggling with it, because all of these have their advantages and disadvantages depending on where you sit, right? And I think it would be good for everybody to understand what the role of pricing is and how the reporting line in that scenario goes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the last, let's say, mistake I would highlight is overestimating the rationality of customers or how they compare prices. Because in reality, customers are behaving irrationally, they follow heuristics, and they pick the option that feels right. So it's a lot about perceptions, it's a lot also about setting price anchors, using psychological pricing in order to make sure that you also steer a bit the customers, both in B2B and B2C, to buy what you would like them to buy. And on this, I wrote an entire chapter on the book, The Pricing Model Revolution.
Yeah. So again, I can kind of piggyback it back on the answer you said in the beginning, right? It's also not about over complexifying it, but keeping it simple to really bring across that value correctly. Am I saying that's
Absolutely, spot on.
if we go a step further, what we're trying to do in this podcast as well is help the pricing specialists into giving them some handles if they want to start an approach towards a more mature pricing process. So what advice would you give to a B2B organization if we're looking into the steps to take for a more mature pricing approach? What would be, from your area of expertise, be the steps to take?
Well, I would start with focus on value and not on your spreadsheet. Because before touching numbers, we need to understand what different segments value, what outcomes they care about, what alternatives they compare you to, what drives willingness to pay. Because we can sum it up saying pricing is just a translation layer between value and revenue. So taking into account all of this is the starting basis for a great pricing transformation.
Yeah, and for organizations that do not have it very clear yet, what drives the willingness to pay, what different segments value, would you say if you do not have that information yet, start then with, as you said before, start then with some price testing to try to figure these things out?
This could be one option. Another option is to talk to the product managers, because the ones who develop product and solution usually develop them based on some needs from the market. So we can explore talking to these internal resources, or we can also do some co-creation with clients. If we want to, for example, develop a new service or a new offering, we could approach some clients that are open to it and said, you will get an advantage if you co-create this solution with us, so that we better understand how you like it, how we can make it even better to satisfy your needs, so that we really get first-hand feedbacks from the market of what they are seeking and what kind of value they are perceiving. One more point would be to simplifying the offering before it is priced, because you cannot price chaos. If packages, features, or service tiers are unclear internally, then customers will be even more confused externally. So make sure that a clean structure is the basis for clean pricing.
Um, with the clean structure, do you mean the full alignment? So at least everybody understands where is the pricing based upon. So why do we have this specific price? And that the discount structure is clear, or is this already also taking into account the governance around it?
It could be both. Let me give you one example. I was called in by a large and well-known beer manufacturer. They called me in to optimize their terms and conditions. And then we were sitting in a meeting. It was a workshop where we wanted to define the new terms and conditions. And then suddenly we realized that the CEO had a thought on which direction to take. And then finance had another one. And then revenue management another one. And then marketing and sales another one. So what we realized is that the commercial policy was not clearly defined, or it changed over time, or people had something different in mind. So we had to go one step back, clearly define what is our commercial policy looking like. And then when this was defined, it was very simple to translate this into terms and conditions. to fulfill and reach the objectives stated in the commercial policy. So this type of clean structure was the base for a clean pricing expressed in terms and conditions. Another point is then to get basic data in place. And you never should strive for perfect, which can come also later. So you don't need to have a pricing algorithm constructed in one day. What you need is, for example, win-loss data, discounting patterns, usage or consumption metrics, segment-specific performance, or even a simple dashboard that can unlock insights. So this is something that you should be starting with. One more point is then to establish a discounting discipline early on, because the fastest way to destroy good pricing strategy is not to manage discounts. So we need to have clear guardrails, approval path, incentives aligned with profitable deals, because sales behavior becomes our pricing reality. As I mentioned before, without value selling, value pricing stays on paper.
How would you get sales to adhere to your value selling? Is that more with capability training and bringing them along, or how would you approach that?
I would do two things. The first is to make sure that their objectives are aligned with the company objectives. So avoid only giving volume or market share objectives, but also incentivize clearly the margin and profitability so that both are taken into account. And then once this is in place, you also need to provide the tools. So what I often do in my projects is at the end of them, I do a negotiation excellence training where we review together with the sales team, where are we superior in terms of value? How can we sell this value? What techniques are there? What are objectives that we can expect from customers, and what will be our reply? So on one hand, you have the right incentives. On the other hand, you have the right approach and negotiation techniques so that you can also reach your objectives. And
That's a very nice way to bring sales into the picture.
yeah, and this also relates then to another point, which is communicating pricing as a value story. So you should make sure that customers are not buying a number, but they are buying the outcome. So you should equip your sales team with talk tracks, with objection handling, with value proof points, with ROI anchors. And you can say that messaging is half the battle. That's why it's so important. One more thing is to test, learn, iterate. So don't try to get it perfect upfront. Start small, pilot with a segment, test pricing matrix, see how to change and optimize it. Because pricing is about evolving and not a one-off event that is not dynamic and not taking into account also how the market is developing. Then another point is to treat pricing as a capability, not as a project, because someone should own it. Processes should exist. You should review pricing quarterly and not every 3 years, and make sure that pricing is maturing in a sustainable way so that you are taking advantage of this. And then, last but not least, you should invest in a pricing tool early on without trying to scale Excel, especially if you are a wholesaler or a company with a lot of SKUs. Because while Excel is great for exploration, it's terrible for governance. As soon as you have multiple segments, discount structures, or reps in the field, you need a centralized source of truth, you need guide rates to build workflows, you need approval logics, you need version control, you need reporting. And the proper pricing tool is not just making pricing easier, it makes it consistent, it makes it enforceable, and it makes it scalable.
I do think as well what we see happening a lot, Excel starts being built up, and there are all kinds of formulas in there, and there are macros in there, and at some point nobody really dares to touch it anymore because they might break something and the whole sheet is not working anymore, right? So it's really about that governance part to make sure that that's in there.
Absolutely. And the worst thing is if the one who, let's say, programmed or developed this Excel is then gone, he went in retirement, or he left the company, and then nobody knows how to optimize the formulas in it.
So next question for you would be is, what do you currently consider the top 3 challenges in pricing for wholesaler, distributor and manufacturers?
Well, I'm currently working for a number of wholesalers, distributors, and manufacturers, so I can really share what I'm usually seeing in the market. First, the challenge is to manage complexity across customers, channels, and SKUs, because wholesalers and manufacturers often are dealing with 10,000s of SKUs or highly fragmented customer segments, multi-tiered channels with different expectations, legacy contracts, and one-off expectations. All this creates pricing entropy. So many prices and rules that no one can clearly explain why customers pay what they are paying. The result are inconsistency, leakages, and margin erosions. So this is really a challenge that needs to be managed.
Am I understanding correctly that the biggest challenges you're experiencing is it has been overcomplicated?
Exactly. Overcomplicated and difficult to be managed. Yeah. A second one is related to controlling discounting and rebates. In these sectors, the real price is almost never the list price because it's shaped by multiple factors. It could be volume discounts, it can be customer specific overrides, or distributor programs, or rebates and incentives, or end of year true ups. The challenge isn't just setting a price, it's controlling all the ways that price gets reduced. And without a tight governance, deals drift far away from the intended margins. And this then brings you to a solution where you are not there where you would like to be in terms of profitability.
Yeah. And specifically with rebates, nobody has really been looking at those for the last 5 to 10 years. It became a legacy kind of thing that exists in the organization, which doesn't even align anymore with the strategic goals, and they are not annually reviewed. How do you approach then to resolve that issue?
Absolutely. It's a deja vu. And one of the solutions here is to step back and review our commercial objectives to make sure that we understand what do we want to have in terms of objectives, how should our customers behave, what is our tit for tat, that then is reflected in the rebates. So this needs to be recalibrated if we are changing our commercial policy. And last but not least, pricing is volatile. Pricing is set in a volatile cost environment, which means that manufacturers and distributors are hit by fluctuating input costs, by freight volatility, by supplier constraints, by currency movements. So all this means that you have to make sure that you adapt and include all these changing elements so that you're not wondering by the time you push through a cost increase, margins are already underwater and it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, So this is again the dynamics of the market, right? So being able to price quicker, adjust quicker. I think right now, if you look at the current situation, we had the Suez Channel, of course, being blocked up a few years ago, or tariffs being hit or not hit at the same time. So you need to be able to readjust prices almost like a retail situation sometimes in B2B. Yeah.
That's very true. So this means that if you want to stay profitable, you need to be faster, more data-driven, and have a solution in place that supports you. That's why I'm a big fan of your solution or similar solutions that enable companies to act fast.
And just a question from my side, Danilo, because our listeners now have heard, of course, the books that you've been publishing. So hopefully they're going to buy them as well to upskill their pricing knowledge a bit. But let's say they want to see you in person or they want to invite you. How can they reach you, and what's the best way, or where's the area of expertise where they can really give you a call for?
The best thing and the easiest and quickest is via LinkedIn. Just send a message. And well, I can be of help by doing, for example, a pricing health check to understand where are opportunities that we quickly can use to generate quick wins and then boost profits, or do an entire pricing transformation because you are wondering how to tackle this specific pricing question. And I'm happy to support and provide my view.
Thank you very much, Danilo. And yet again, it is a pleasure of hosting you, and hopefully we see each other soon again.
Thanks so much, Roy. The pleasure was all mine. Thanks so much for having me.